Now, the Mexican Revolution is important to appreciate because the Mexican Revolution, again, the Porfiriato was violent. Overwhelmingly, people of European descent controlled both wealth and governmental decision-making power. Foreign companies linked through Wall Street exercised power in Mexico. So when we take a look at the Mexican Revolution, it has many characters and movements for change. And nearly every Mexican family living in the United States has a personal story about relatives and their experiences in the revolution. And the ultimate cost of the revolution was a loss in lives. Contemporary historians approximate that 2.1 million people died between 1910 and 1920. Just 100 years after Hidalgo's September 16th Grito de Dolores, the carnage began when Francisco Madero declared the Diaz regime illegal on November 20th, 1910. So in the Mexican Revolution, nearly every racial and class interest participated in revolutionary struggle to create a just society. Let's take a look at what happened in the Mexican Revolution.
My father grew up in this little village in the mountains of Jalisco, in the middle of Mexico. And he said they had chickens and goats and dirt floors, and they had horses and cattle.
Then in 1914, war came to Altos de Jalisco. And just like that, everything was gone.
All his brothers and sisters were slaughtered. All that was left was this 11-year-old kid and one sister that was 13 and another sister that her husband had been killed at the dinner table. And my father said that when his father came back from Santa Monica, California, where he'd gone for a year to work on a horse ranch, he saw all the cattle had been stolen, all the horses had been taken. Almost all his sons had been killed. And he started screaming, "It's the end of the world. God has forsaken us." And he started drinking and died. On the other hand, mi chaparrita, my grandmother from Oaxaca, she saw the same circumstances and she didn't fall apart. She said, "Mañana es otro milagro de Dios." Tomorrow's another miracle from God. Y con el favor de Dios, and with the blessing of God, we will survive. And they left the mountains of Jalisco.
The family headed down to León, to the valley of Guanajuato. Like hundreds of thousands of other Mexicans, they went in search of a train that would take them north, away from the war that now consumed Mexico. The Mexican Revolution began in 1910 as a revolt against President Porfirio Diaz. Diaz ruled Mexico for 35 years, relying on foreign investment to transform the nation.
He attracted considerable foreign investment from Europe and from the United States.
U.S. companies invested nearly $2 billion in Mexico, in mining, commercial agriculture, and in the railroads that carried silver, coffee, and oil north, and brought south the machinery that built modern Mexico.
Porfirio Diaz is credited with the modernization of Mexico, but at what cost? There's rising poverty. Historians estimate that 90% of Mexicans were landless. Rural people were kicked off their small land holdings to make way for this concentration of corporate agriculture.
Porfirio Diaz had promised to step down. But in 1910, he declared himself president for one more term. His opponent, Francisco Madero, called for an insurrection. In the south rose Emiliano Zapata and his army of landless peasants. In the north, the dashing Pancho Villa became the face of the rebellion. The trains that once linked the Mexican economy to the United States now carry the armies of the Mexican Revolution. as the fighting engulfed Mexico, the tracks running north provided the only means of escape for almost 1 million Mexicans, who walked for miles, sometimes waiting weeks for the occasional empty train.
From 1/10 to 1/8 of Mexico's population, an estimated 1 million, perished in the revolution. About the same number went north.
The Villaseñors made their way toward the United States and headed right into the worst of the fighting.
Fighting was going on all around me. And my father said that even after a day of slaughter, his mother would have them all kneel down and thank God they had survived. And if they didn't have anything to eat, she'd get little round river rocks and have them suck on them. When the moon came up in the Mexican Indian culture, that's the left eye of God. And then the stars are our family because we come from the stars. And she'd point to the stars and say, that's, your great-grandfather this, and this is your uncle this and this. My father said that if it wasn't for his mother's indestructible faith, they would have died over and over and over on their journey north.
Midway between the mountains of central Mexico and the border of the United States, Juan Salvador no longer yearned for the life he'd known in Altos de Jalisco.
My father thought that the United States would be like paradise. Like their little paradise that they'd had in the mountains of Jalisco was nothing compared to the paradise of the United States. And they understood that once you crossed the Rio Grande River in Texas, that there was food for everyone and there was jobs for everyone, and that the people actually got fat. He couldn't imagine such a thing.
Finally, one day a train came, a cattle train, filled with manure, but also filled with possibilities.
When my father and his family finally got to the American border, crossed the Rio Grande from El Paso, Texas, it wasn't anything like they expected. There was nothing, just sand. And there were thousands of people trying to get across.
El Paso